Good afternoon. My name is Tim Rupnarayan, Program Officer for Bangladesh with the International Republican Institute, or IRI. I'd like to welcome each of you from around the world to today's virtual panel discussion, featuring a conversation on art and activism in Afghanistan, Burma, and Bangladesh with three incredible guests. Before we begin, I just want to cover some quick housekeeping for everyone. The chat function will be closed during the moderation. However, during the Q&A session, the Q&A function will be open, after which you are going to be able to field your questions, which will then be moderated by our team. So thank you all for joining from around the world to talk about this very important topic. Before we begin today's discussion, I'd like to share with you all some of IRI's recent work in the space of art and activism. Based on IRI's recent work with artists, musicians, and other non-traditional civic actors in Bangladesh and across South Asia, it is evident that people around the world, particularly youth and marginalized communities who are operating in challenging environments, are eager to engage politically and make their voices heard if given the right forum. In Bangladesh, IRI has supported 11 advocacy partners to implement socially conscious art and culture projects of their creative choice, intended to raise awareness on key issues in their communities. Through these efforts, IRI's partners have produced 225 media products, including 160 photographs, 8 films, 24 drama and dance performances, 30 paintings, 1 book, and 2 music videos. The public could access these media products at public exhibitions and events, and online via Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, and other websites, and of course, on television. In total, the media products were viewed by 2,265 people in person at exhibitions and events, and by just over 79,000 households on television, and just over 300,000 times online. Although these data are not exact, they suggest that nearly 400,000 Bangladeshis engaged with IRI-funded art products. In addition, the art activities were featured in 35 newspaper articles, which further exposed the public to the civically conscious messages included in the media products. And many of these guest audiences included government officials. The significant reach of these civically conscious media products furthered IRI's goal to raise awareness among the public on key political and social issues in Bangladesh using art. The themes covered in these products ranged anywhere from digital literacy, LGBTI inclusion and tolerance, religious tolerance, nonviolence, and human rights. Several 100,000 Bangladeshis were exposed to these messages, which also reached a global audience. And on that note, I will hand it over to Kimber, who will offer today's opening remarks.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending this panel discussion on art and activism in 3 very important and dynamic countries, Afghanistan, Burma, and Bangladesh. While these 3 countries represent quite different political situations and historical and cultural contexts, they all feature vibrant movements of artists fighting for social and political change. Too often, artists of all varieties are excluded from the idea of traditional civil society, but their voices expressed through art can be powerful forces for progress and change. Art, as many of you know, is a powerful tool for social change in general. It can evoke feelings of empathy and outrage. It can shift perspectives on issues. It can transform our understanding of what is possible. Across the world, we have seen dance, murals, photographs, etc., be able to contribute to progressive social and political movements. It transcends time and space and can impact people of all socioeconomic and educational backgrounds. Across the globe, artivism, the combination of art and activism, presents an opportunity for strengthening democratic processes from the periphery by using creative mediums to amplify marginalized voices, engage new ideas, provide an arena for public debate at both the local and national levels, and create a new language for social change that is accessible to all. It is with those aims that IRI is increasingly supporting artistic activists in the Asia-Pacific region and around the world who are using visual art, music, performance art, and other forms of creative expression to hold or create civic space, critique the societies in which they live, and push for more inclusive and responsive democratic governments. While cultural activism through art may not directly influence policy change and improve institutional behaviors alone, new forms of expression and engagement at the local level can keep civic space open and lead to broader initiatives to push back against democratic decline. More importantly, art serves as a tool for personal reflection and provides a space for all members of society to connect on a basic human level, to build trust, foster understanding of the other, and open their minds to new possibilities for public life, which are key factors to continuing the fight for greater inclusion and representation of all people. At IRI, we strongly believe that all citizens deserve the right to be heard. Freedom of expression is the bedrock principle of democracy, and art is a foundational part of how societies express themselves. Artists provoke us to think critically about the world around us, whether we agree or disagree with their views. I want to thank you very much for joining this important discussion. Thank you to our incredibly distinguished guests. And we hope that this is the first of many conversations about the vital role of civilly conscious art in democracies and democratic movements around the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Kimber and Tim, for setting the stage for our discussion today. My name is Rhonda Mays, and I'm the Deputy Director of IRI's Asia Pacific Division, and I'm going to be moderating our discussion today. As an art and music lover and also a self-styled democracy nerd, I'm really excited about the conversation we're about to have. I'm really honored and happy to be here with these three panelists in particular. I'm going to introduce them each briefly, but I also want to give them each a chance to introduce themselves to all of you and to tell us more about their work. Before we do that, just as a reminder, the Q&A function will be open, so you can drop your questions in the Q&A function throughout the chat and towards the end, because we really do want this to be a sort of interactive conversation with everyone who is here today. So turning to our panelists, first let me introduce Mr. Umaid Sharifi from Afghanistan. And Umaid is an artist and activist and is president of Art Lords, which is a grassroots movement of artists and volunteers who are working for peace, social justice, and accountability through the power of art and culture. He's currently a fellow at Harvard University and is a Millennium Leadership Fellow with the Atlantic Council. He's an alumnus of the US State Department's International Visitor Leadership Program, IVLP, and has also won many awards for his art and activism. So Umaid, welcome to the discussion. Next, we have Ms. Chu Wai Nien, who is an artist from Myanmar. Chu is an artist and activist who has used her art to explore the struggles of women in society and in Burma's democracy movement. And since the military coup last year in Burma, Chu has been involved in nonviolent resistance, founding the artistic group Right for Right to actively and creatively take part in the massive anti-coup demonstrations that arose in response to the military's brutal takeover. In April of 2021, she fled Burma and is continuing her work in art and activism from exile. And finally, we have Dr. Mubashar Hassan from Bangladesh. Mubashar is an academic and social justice activist. He's currently an adjunct research fellow at the University of Western Sydney's Humanitarian and Development Research Initiative and a member of the Research Advisory Council for the Resolve Network hosted at the US Institute of Peace. His interest is in how rock and roll and hip hop music and musicians interact with authoritarianism and democracy in Bangladesh. And this is a topic on which he has published 2 book chapters, as well as a variety of op-eds in different sources. So welcome to all 3 of you. And as I said, as a starting point for our discussion, I'd really like each of you to tell us about yourselves, talk a little bit about what drew you to artistic expression in the first place, and what have been the main areas of focus of your work in recent years. So Chu, maybe we'll start with you and then go to Umaid and Mubashar first. So Chu, over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to see all of you here. And first of all, I really want to thank you so much for organizing it and for listening my story and about the situation in Myanmar. I'm from Myanmar, and most of my artwork are a painting. And I created a series of a women portrait after a traumatized moment when I was 18. I faced sexual harassment on the street in Myanmar and with my younger sister. And starting from that point, I making a series of painting to describe the unequal saturation and unsafe saturation of the daily life of women in Myanmar. And at the same time, I was born in a really small town and live in the city and work in the capital. So living a different places in one time is give me a dimension and a perspective of looking up to my society and culture. And from this dimension, I paint the beauty and the culture and the history. And then from the different dimension, and I combine with also with the to improve our society and also especially the life of women in Myanmar. So most of my painting, you will see a strong women and colorful and also a full and rich of culture.
Thank you, Shu. Umaid, over to you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm very happy and honored to be in this panel. Thanks to IRI for organizing this and giving us an opportunity to speak about art, culture, artivism, and especially about our countries, Afghanistan, Burma, and Bangladesh. My name is Umaid Sharifi. I work at Art Lords. At Art Lords, we are energized, we are motivated, and we have a desire to pave the way for social transformation by using the power of art. We have worked in Afghanistan for the last 8 years, created a relationship between art and the people. And that allows for a much needed psychological shift that really opens up people's minds to alternative perspectives. So at Art Lords, we have created platforms where we have seen that people talk about very important social issues, and they try to find solutions in the heart of those problems. And that platforms are created by Art Lords through murals, through street theater, through music, through animations, and all of that. So at Art Lords, we are not just only promoting critical thinking through art, but also encouraging empathy, encouraging understanding, tolerance, and acceptance. And that only happens when you are trying to give a visual voice to the voiceless people who does not have any other platform, any other means to raise their concerns, their issues, but giving them this opportunity, they feel engaged, they feel involved. So that is Art Lords, the movement of artivists.
Thanks, Umaid. And Mubashar, finally to you.
Thank you very much, and very good morning from down under. As you know, I'm joining you from Sydney, Australia. So as a researcher, I'm interested in understanding the socio-political context of rock and roll and hip hop music in Bangladesh. And there's a bit of, and by training, I'm a political scientist, and there's a bit of personal activism involved in choosing this spectrum of research about which I'm going to talk a bit about today. Because generally there is a lack of interest in among Bangladeshi academia or those who study Bangladesh in exploring this hip hop and rock and roll musical, and what makes this musician to produce their music and write their lyrics. Personally, I grew up as a teenager in 90s, and those who do not know, rock musician played a vital role in changing values among Bangladeshi youths, especially the urban youths through 90s. They offered a pathway of activism in mounting criticism to traditional culture through its rebellious lyrics and criticism to pseudo-democracy, corruption, and authoritarian political culture. So I tried to grasp those in my research, and recently I saw that there was a newer type of movement like through hip hop music emerging from Bangladesh. So through my research, I've studied how they talk about political corruption, inequality, lack of freedom of expression and justice, the persistent culture of fear and call for social change. In interviews with some of my research assistants, these rappers told that they were influenced heavily by the American rappers like Tupac Shakur, Eminem, NWA, and so forth. So it's a pretty exciting topic that I write and talk about, and I'm very grateful for IRI to inviting me, and look forward to speak more on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mubashar, Umaid, and Chu. As you can all see, we have a great variety of experience in our panelists today, and really excited to learn more about the work that you've been doing and hear from you. As you've each highlighted, in cultures around the world, we've seen the important role that artistic expression can play in moments of political and social change, and in movements for democratic reform and social justice. And so I want to dig into that a little bit in each of your country contexts. And Chu, maybe starting with you, can you tell us a little bit about the historical role of art and culture in social movements in Myanmar, and what role have art and artists played in the democratic opening that Burma was experiencing over the past decade, before the coup, of course, last February?
Yes. If you ask kind of what art can change within the culture, and then in the past, we have a lot, but if I have to pick one, because we have a time, and if I have to pick one, and there is one really interesting thing, it's kind of a tradition, a culture, and also art and politics included. I want to talk about this moment. It's I have to ask one question first. It's have you ever think about a women long skirt can use during the protest to fight for the politics? And sound bizarre. It's like unusual, because after the coup d'etat, after the military coup, a lot of people we demonstrate on the street, and at this time we started with a peaceful and non-violence fight, and everywhere the whole public and every population, we keep this non-violence protest. And but from the military side, when they start doing a violence thing, we use the protection, the barrier is like the hanging a women long skirt. So when you check on the Google and internet, you will see a lot of a photo that you hang women lingerie and skirt on the street. So it's a really good protection, because a man, the military guy, they don't pass through under it, because for a long time in our society and in our cultures, and almost every people and every Burmese people, we believe that if you walk under the skirt of a woman, and we call it longi, it's like a sarong, or the women garment that we use under the bottom part. So for quite a long time, even for the clothes, we didn't have the right place to wash together with the man clothes in the washing machine. And after that's to hang it, you have to hang on the lower level, and no one pass under it, especially a man. When they cross and when they walk under it, the masculinity, the charming, the glory, and the lack of the man, you will go down, because it's an impurity. This is impure. So Still, a lot of family in Myanmar, they still believe in it and they still following it. But during the revolution, we use this as the barrier to protest this, and it is really helpful and useful for sure, because a lot of military men, they cannot work under it and they are not dare to work under it because they think it's going to bring a backlash in their front line. So if I have to go back to this concept for quite a long time since I was a teenager, when I start painting about it, and I feel that I found this one, even the clothes doesn't have the right to do the same thing as a man. So that's why sometimes you can see in my painting, I use a women skirt, a traditional fabric pattern, I use as a canvas background, and to describe that we are strong and we are confident and we are proud of being who we are. So this, during the protest, after a lot of people, we use this, and also the message behind it, and it's like a wake up to the Burmese women's and also the citizen, like yeah, we might have a lot of things to upgrade and to improve our society. At the same time, we also use this this one as a weapon to fight for the military who's doing a lot of violence, and using this in the non-violence protest. So I think this is a really interesting, and everything involved in one thing, plus the culture and tradition, everything. So I have to pick this moment.
Thank you, Chu. That's a very interesting example of the intersection of culture and art and superstition and all of these other pieces that came together. Omaid, over to you. Similar question, what has been the historical role of art and culture in movements for social change in Afghanistan? And can you talk about what role artistic expression played in social and political changes that happened after the fall of the Taliban in 2001?
Thank you, Rhonda. If I could be very specific in the context of Afghanistan and in the context of art lords itself, and just taking a small example of the last 20 years, since the fall of Taliban in 2001 until 2021, August. So I would say that one of the most important achievements that public art brought was promoting critical thinking. So when you're creating a visual experience where people can come together, paint together, be part of a theater show and discuss the important social issues and also think and ask questions, I think that is a very important psychological shift in the minds of people who are not taught critical thinking. In our education system, in our households in Afghanistan, historically, we are stopped from asking questions. You're not taught the skills of critical thinking, not in your schools, not in your mosques, not in your universities. So bringing art and creating an art between people, it really is helping with that critical thinking aspect of it. And also you are in countries like Afghanistan, you need to start dialogue. And I think art was critical in the last 20 years, especially visual arts, to create this dialogue among different ethnic groups, different people, because Afghanistan is a diverse country and there's a lot of misperceptions, misunderstandings about the whole population as well. So I think creating that platform by art to have a dialogue, a honest conversation about grievances and whatever challenges in the system. So it really is helping the people to understand and accept each other and have the empathy and understanding of each other and the challenges that they're facing. And also going through 50 years of war in our recent history, people need healing. People need to be kind in situations and in places like Afghanistan. You need a lot of kindness. You need a lot of empathy and love. So I think art, and especially public art, brings that kind of empathy and love and kindness and helps people to embrace each other and be kind to each other. And at the same time, we realized at Ortlos that our work, and especially the work of public artists, it's really encouraging the whole generation of Afghans to come up with their own initiatives, be it a small initiative in their own villages or provinces or at the national level. So it encourages people to not wait for their government or the international community to do something for them, but they have to start somewhere. For example, our example of Ortlots, that we saw how psychologically negatively impact these blast wall has on the people of Kabul and people of Afghanistan. It was these 8-meter tall concrete walls, and it was sort of a prison for everyone who was living in Afghanistan. And it was a divide between the rich and the poor, the powerful and the weak. So we changed that negative psychological impact that those walls had into a beautiful visual experience. And we painted these walls, and these walls disappeared. So by putting this example to the people of Afghanistan, especially the young people who have a lot of desire for change. So this is important. The young people have that desire to change. And once you're putting these kind of examples through public art, that they can come up with their own initiatives, I think it really helps them to find solutions in the heart of the problem. So promoting critical thinking, healing and art therapy, creating a platform for dialogue and acceptance, and also finding alternative and new initiatives are all examples of what sort of art lords and art can bring in a society like Afghanistan.
Thanks, Umaid. Yeah, I think that the power of art is to create this space and this dialogue, exactly as you've said, and in a way that can be non-threatening in places where there's low trust or there's division, political divisions that otherwise preclude conversation. So it is such a powerful force, I think. Mubashir, finally coming to you, obviously Bangladesh has had a slightly different political trajectory than Burma and Afghanistan, facing sort of a different variety and intensity of political and democratic challenges, but challenges nonetheless. So I'm wondering if you could also tell us a little bit about the role of art and culture in Bangladesh, and in particular, expand a little bit on what you had started mentioning about the rise of hip hop and rock music as a tool for social and political change in the country.
No, thank you. I think when, if I have to give a bit of overview of the evolution of art and culture in the key moments of political and social change in Bangladesh, I need to divide it into 4 sections. So one is the pre-independence era, when Bangladesh was part of Pakistan, and during the independence war, and the second is the immediate post-war period, and during 1990s democracy movement against the military dictator, and now. So in summary, role of art and culture is heavily embedded into the history of Bangladesh's independence movement. The poetries of Rabindranath Tagore played a key role in shaping the idea of Bengali nationalism in pre-independence era during 1970. And during the 1970 war against Pakistan, a radio station called Shadhin Bangla Bedar Kendra, which translate into English as Betar, a free Bengal radio station in English, kept the motivation of Bengali freedom fighters high through broadcasting motivational patriotic songs and satirical programs. And later researchers argued that role of art and culture played a key role in shaping psychological warfare. So fast forward just after the independence, it was a war-torn country, and a freedom fighter named Azam Khan, who is the pioneer of rock and roll music, began this trend in Bangladesh, and he looked for inspiration in the West. And we could see that the influence of Jimi Hendrix, George Harrison, and the Doors were heavily on him. And his band, Ucharon, introduced drums, guitars, and keyboards into their rendition of local music. And Bangladeshi audiences perhaps most of the audiences had never heard anything like it. With his long hair and bell-bottom jeans, stadiums, concert, and powerful lyrics, which often delivered a social and political message, Azam Khan became a pop culture phenomena. So I'll cite one example from his song that how it captured the inequality of Bangladesh after the war, after the war. So one of his famous tracks is Bangladesh, and it became a signature of the difficulties of Bangladesh was going through after the independence. And Khan painted a grim picture of the young nation, which was gripped by extreme poverty and famine. He sings of a boy born in a slum near the rail lines, whose death leaves his hopeless mom crying. Throughout this melancholic guitar-driven song, Khan depicts the desperation of Bangladesh's early years, punctuating his lament with cries of, "Oh, Bangladesh." Khan, who died in 2011, influenced a generation of young Bangladeshis who are critically reflect in the country's tradition. And then in 1990s, poetry again played a key role during the military-driven government. And there was a big movement called Road Safety Movement in 2018, which was inspired by calling for greater regulation and safety in road transport, following the death of 2 young children in the road. And we found that some of the slogans were inspired by hip hop musicians of that movement, especially, which is not a good example, but especially we saw Bengali version of NWS F the Police was chanted by many activists. And there were songs produced glorifying that movement. So to sum up, historically, inequality, call for tolerance, call for democracy, and rejection to authoritarian culture were featured throughout the history of rock and roll and hip hop music in Bangladesh.
Excellent. Thank you, Mubashar. I think, the very history of rock and roll globally is one of sort of social reaction and changing minds about social norms. So it's interesting to see the ways in which that has carried into different contexts as well. Obviously, 2 of our 3 countries that we've been talking about today had very dramatic and traumatic political changes in 2021. And so I'd like to dig into those situations in Burma and Afghanistan a little bit and talk about the role of art and artists in each of those places. So Umaid, starting with you maybe, the return of the Taliban obviously represents a rapid closing of the political and the social space in the country. What has this meant for artists in Afghanistan, and how is art, or could art be used to fight that closing of space?
Well, unfortunately, we knew that Taliban will ban any expression of art. I lived during the Taliban when they were in charge from 1996 to 2001. And I vividly remember riding my bicycle on any of streets of Kabul. You will find broken TVs, radios, cassettes. It was a public exhibition of executing music instruments. And if they had caught a musician by accident, they will beat him to nearly death and then put all his instruments around his neck and just walk him around the city to shame him. So that was the Taliban before. And this Taliban has not changed. There's no Taliban 2.0. There's only one Taliban, and the Taliban is afraid of any expression of art and is afraid of Afghan women as well. So these are the 2 very most important things to note. The Taliban are scared of any expression of art and also scared of the Afghan women. And as it happened, when they conquered Kabul again in August 15th, even before announcing their cabinet, they started destroying and painting over all the murals that we had done. So art lords had painted over 2,000 murals in all of Afghanistan. And these were not our murals. These were the murals of the people of Afghanistan, because every mural was painted by 50 to 100 people. Everybody joined those murals. And these murals were about social issues, fighting corruption, for transitional justice, for accountability and transparency, for empathy and kindness. And then the Taliban came and destroyed all those murals. And the same happened with a lot of musicians. You will see videos of burning music instruments coming up. The moment they conquered Kandahar, they killed the comedian. So this has been their case and their history and their identity. So they cannot move away from the way they are. And currently, a lot of artists and activists are either in hiding or they cannot perform their works. Some of them have been lucky to get out of Afghanistan to pursue their work. Lucky in terms of that they're at least safe. They at least have a voice to continue. As I was in Kabul on August 15th when the Taliban came in, and actually we were painting a mural on the same exact day as any other day. But I was forced to leave my country to have a voice, to continue my work on art and culture. And the same has been the case for a lot of Afghan artists who have got out of Afghanistan to at least be able to breathe and continue their work until we free Afghanistan and we go back and continue our work in our own country. At this moment of time, we have seen that the current protests which are happening in Kabul and other provinces, they use graffiti, they use murals to raise their voices. We have seen artists painting in their own houses, and they're picking up very important issues of women's rights, transitional justice, the extrajudicial killings of the Taliban. So art is now not on the public display, but has gone underground. And when art goes underground, it becomes more efficient and it becomes more impactful. So I think at this moment of time, what we can do is to support those artists which are inside Afghanistan, and also the ones who are outside Afghanistan, and people like Chu or Mubashir or other artists and activists from all over the world. They can continue becoming a voice for the people of Afghanistan through their research, through their art, because we cannot look away from Afghanistan. The world cannot look away from Afghanistan and what's happening. We cannot just let the terrorist group take millions of people hostage and then drag the whole country back to centuries back. So I think the diaspora, the artists in South Asia, specifically, they can be very creative. They can do animations, they can do music, they can paint murals, as we have been doing all over the world, to make sure that we have this voice, we continue reviving the Afghan art and culture, and continue becoming a voice for all those people who are taken hostage.
Thanks, Umaid. Chu, obviously, Burma has also experienced a very brutal crackdown following the coup last February. And you touched a little bit in your earlier remarks on one of the ways that you all have used art and culture in the resistance to that coup. But I wonder if you could expand on that and talk a little bit about the different ways that visual art and other forms of artistic expression have featured in the resistance to the military's brutal crackdown, and also talk a little bit about the environment for free expression and the impact on artists since the coup.
It's not only since the coup, and I was born under the military government since I was born, and I grew up under them. Also, since before the coup, military, they not only know about the power of art, and also the people from the military, they know the power of art, because just a simple of a poem, a simple of a drawing can wake up the mind of the people, can bring the power of the unity of the people, and they know that. That's why in Myanmar, for quite a long time, the censorship rule was really restricted. The obvious law, of course, that you cannot paint this polity, you cannot paint the religion, and not only the censorship, sometimes even in the painting, the use of color like red, is, they think it's the color of rebellion, so they cannot use. And sometimes when they deny to show in the public, instead of they giving back the painting, the artwork, sometimes they destroy it, they stamp on the middle of the painting, or they stamp on the face of the portrait. So this is the life that we have to grow up under them like that. And all the music, the movie and everything that we have to watch, just the in front or maybe at the end, there is a bit of messages to convince them that with the propaganda news or the fake news, or like just to live under them. So not only as we know the power of course, also them, they know the power of, because when you point with a gun on someone's head, and like, yeah, you have to believe this, you have to believe this message, not all of us will say yes. So, and also it's in the world, I think the same everywhere. All the country, they want, when they want to dominate, they use art. And in Myanmar, the military, they're using us in this way for quite a long time, but still that there are still people who's not following and who not accepting this idea. Of course, I explain this because when I grow up, since a teenager, since before I can think for myself, I don't have the time, since I didn't have the critical thinking, to thinking what I'm doing, what I'm believing, who I am. Before this time, I was believing, I was one of them. I was following some of the idea. I was on the frame that they put to me. So now our generation, and also the young generation, the way they think are better than me. And also thanks to the internet, and also you can check the book, and you can listen to the workshop and panel talk, and you can change a lot. So the mindset is changing, starting from the last decade. And also we have a short time to taste the democracy in Myanmar after a long time of under the dictatorship. So starting even a short time, everyone have a chance to grow up, to bloom. I have to say, it's like blooming, and it's like the light. Even the short times, is very few short times, like we can see the light. So under the light, we can see what is wrong and what is not right, and what is put a frame on it. So during the fight and during the protest, after the military coup, so we use this knowledge, and young people, we use this knowledge, and with this knowledge, and we use also the power of art everywhere you cannot accept. When you want to make the changes, when you want to make one movement, art is always together with it. You need a flag, you need a color, and you need a motivation, you need the unity of the people. And a lot of them, you can start this from art, and in a really delicate way, in a non-violence way, in a peaceful way. So for this, and the military, they know this is powerful, and they're afraid of it. That's why they're taking in charge a lot of young people, a lot of talented people. They put in the jail, and they torture, and sometimes they make it not to live inside the country, and a lot of people have to run out. And me, I'm lucky, that's why I'm outside of Myanmar and I'm safe. But still, a lot of people and a lot of artists, they stay inside. Some of them are still in the prison, some of them are still fighting it. But we know that what is powerful, and then with using this power, and using in all the media, and when I mentioned, it's not only about painting, with all the media, and in every field, and every young people, you using all this power to like a unity, and then to reach the target that we all deserve.
Thanks, Chu. I think the examples of Burma and Afghanistan are so powerful, because they show that even in sort of the most brutal of circumstances, there's something in the human spirit that still like drives us towards art and creative expression. And I think there's something very, very powerful in that, that obviously movements across time have tapped into, because it is such a powerful force, and such a human thing for us to want that sort of expression and connection. Mubashir, I wanted to shift to you a little bit and talk about Bangladesh. Obviously, thankfully, Bangladesh has not experienced a traumatic reversal over the past year in the political environment, but instead, we've seen that democracy indicators from VDEM, from Freedom House and others show a sort of steady erosion of political freedom in the country. And in addition to this, we've seen instances of Islamic militants that represent a sort of different kind of threat to freedom of expression in the country. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what this pressure from the state and from religious extremists means for artists in that environment, and how artists and musicians are using their art and their work to sort of push open the space in the country, the civic space in the country.
Oh, thank you. That is an interesting question. We, in one of our recent studies, we talked with the hip hop artists to understand how do they negotiate these dual pressure, rising authoritarian political culture, and also from Islamist militancy. And we found quite interesting that there's one group of artists who are kind of like mid-age, maybe 40 or 35, have a job and settle down in life with family. They are kind of asserting self-censorship because they're a bit fearful of the, not only, fearful about government repression, because there is a law called Digital Security Act that is criticized by human rights organizations as a draconian law, and that could put anyone in jail for 4 to 14 years, I think, if they offend someone's religious feeling or sentiment, or sentiment around the history that is regulated by the current regime. So we could see that offending someone's sentiment is a very abstract and fluid language, and within that, anything and anyone could be tried within that. And in the last few years, there were journalists like Shohidul Alam was taken to prison, and many other activists were tortured and so forth. But at the same time, because of the pressure from the international community, the government is also, it seems that they're kind of trying to revise. Only time will say what will happen in future. So within that conjecture, when we had a frank discussion with 4 leading hip hop artists in Bangladesh. So those who say that they're worried, there's an interesting case. One guy who went to one of the Western countries and he studied and developed his political consciousness through the theories of racism, human rights, and justice. He said that, after the blogger killings, as those who do not know, there was a spat of blogger killing from 2013 and until 2016. I think there was about 40 people were killed. He said that he was very concerned about his safety and security. He said that unless I'm alive, there is no point of spearheading a music that would explicitly call to criticize religious jailers. And he said that he asserts self-censorship. There's one other artist that we are very, we thought he was very nice and quite explicit. And he said that he's more fearful about the threats of enforced disappearance and torture rather than dying, to put in his word. And he said that, and I used that in one of the chapters that is being published, that my mom says that bad times doesn't last long. So I'm waiting for the bad time to overcome. to go away, and then I will start thinking. But there's one artist that which is very young and collaborated with Indian rappers, and he seems quite fearless in one of his song called Wrong, which is in a Bengali and Hindi means brushed in 2020. We found that he didn't hold back. He talked about culture of fear. He talked about repression on women. And he also named names, journalist couples who were murdered in their bedroom. He talked about photographer Shohidul Alam in the prison for publishing truth. And he also said in his song, this is not my word to put it explicitly for the viewers, that the dictator running the country, but everyone is silent, and so on. So it's pretty energized and pretty rebellious. And there is another song I want, as a researcher, I thought I should give you some of my findings so that you could relate to it. So one of the song called Atonko, or which is in English name Fear, and the artist declared that if we talk about injustice, the next day you will discover my beheaded body. So you could see that song, that sort of like rebellion, that sort of like fear running through their music. And it was not like this during 1990s. I will finish with just one example of a favorite song of mine that was published in 1998. And it was criticizing the pseudo democratic culture, and it was by a rock band called Warface. And the song called Dhushor Manchitro, or Faded Map. And that in that song, that Warface talked about hopeless time with dead bodies on the street every day, and arrogant blue Mercedes rushing past them, where in that Mercedes democracy is winking at the injustice. So that sort of, we don't see that sort of sophisticated kind of nuance in today's music because of various pressures. Thank you.
Thanks, Mubashir. I think you highlight a really interesting point about the artistic community and the ways in which it gives sort of everyone space to express themselves to their comfort level. There are some people who are more risk averse or less risk averse, and you see that coming through in their work and the ways in which they're willing to sort of more directly or less directly call out the injustices or the closing of space that they're seeing. And I think it creates a very fulsome kind of community and a fulsome kind of expression where you have these different avenues and different degrees to which people are willing and able to express themselves, but it creates a very sort of comprehensive picture in some ways. So I have one last question for each of you, and then we're going to just open it up to the audience. We have some really great questions coming in already, so we'll do this one really quickly so that we can get to some of the other questions that have come in. So just a quick round robin, maybe Umaid, Mubashir, then Chu. What kind of support do artists need from the international community, from their communities at home, in order to be able to continue the work that they're doing, pushing for social change?
Thank you, Rhonda. I think it's imperative and it's very important that the international organizations, the diaspora, they support the work of artists and activists, because they are the people that do not have a paycheck. They do not belong to bigger organizations. They do not have a salary. So in order to continue to live and work and be impactful, they need some level of support, and that is very important, that if donor organizations could continue supporting initiatives and organizations and artists who are either inside their own countries or in exile, because in both scenarios their voices matter, and they can be very impactful in pushing and standing up against the governments and whatever is happening in countries like Afghanistan and Burma. So I think give us the platform, talk to us, hear our stories. I think it's very important that we put faces to the stories. If you hear a story about Afghanistan, from the CNN, it's much different than if I talk to you about how I got out of Afghanistan. So it's very important to listen, have empathy, and then continue. If there is donations, donate to initiatives that are supporting artists and activists. And if donor organizations, for example, like IRI could help, that I'm sure are doing that, continue supporting these artists and activists.
Thanks so much. Mubashar, how about?
Yeah, so hi. So yeah, since I'm not an artist, I reached out to a few, and I think there are three things came out. One is that exposure, international exposure of Bangladeshi artists would be really good, and in order to kind of minimize the culture of fear or threats, it would be also good if IRI or some or like-minded organization could promote joint collaboration from American artists with it could be hip hop artist or rock and roll artist with Bangladeshi musician. And though you didn't ask for what sort of support researchers need, I think it is also imperative that documenting this journey of rock music, because if you look into the stories or narratives of Bangladesh that is being internationally known, it's mostly about climate change, development, Islamist militancy, and so forth, but nothing about rock democracy or stuff. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
For me, when I left the country, I left everything that I have built for more than 10 years inside the country. So when I have to exile with no connection, no friends, the first 6 months was like a really depressing time, and I almost gave it everything, and I feel I was nothing, and I couldn't do anything. I didn't know anything, no friends, no connection. So for me, if you want to help, every help is meaningful, even a small one. For example, when you see the artist, when we make this kind of a talk event, and when you see the news about Myanmar and you share it on your social media and you share this with your friend and you talk about it, and even this is really helpful. And for the next step, if you want to help better than that, and if you know a gallery, if you know an exhibition, if you know someone in the art field, and introduce, yes, I know this artist, left the country, no friends, and I will introduce you. And this introduction is gonna be so helpful. At least we will have a new friend, at least we talk, and at least we feel that we are not nothing. You have something, a friend to talk. And even if you have want to go deeper than that to help, of course, a donation, and you can donate directly to the artist, or you can donate to the exhibition, or you can collect the hour of the artist, and then it's gonna be really grateful. Like also the artists who stay inside Myanmar and they still didn't have a now they are facing for the median or the equipments are, because of the currency is getting so high, and also import export, everything was a mess. So they were so difficult to have it. So also for them is the donation for the artist staff, or also for the supply man is really helpful. Also for the artists outside the country, like me, like building everything again, everything is helpful. So this is wherever you want to make, you can make a start from the small thing. And if you like better, and if you like as our artwork, and you can go deeper. Thank you so much.
Thanks to all three of you for those answers. And yes, Mubashar, thank you for pointing out that researchers also need support, because it's important to have that sort of objective take on all of this and help us really process this in sort of a removed way to understand what is the full impact of everything that we're seeing. We've got lots of great questions coming in from the audience, so I'm going to sort of go straight into them. And Mubashar, starting with you, the question is specifically to Bangladesh. Rock music and hip hop are Western musical traditions. So how widely popular are rock and hip hop compared to traditional music in Bangladesh? And do Bangladeshi rappers and rock musicians integrate traditional Bangladeshi music into their rock and hip hop music?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and of course, a kind of predictable question. So in Bangladesh, rock and roll was, at least what I saw, was huge in 1990s, really huge. So to put it in that way, that someone would propose someone with rock and roll music lyrics, that is that sort of huge thing, that personal style shapes, and they were like idolized. But eventually, because of piracy and other stuff, and because artists were not making enough money, it kind of died down. And at the moment in Bangladesh, nothing is bigger than Bollywood music and Islamic preaching. So let's put it this way. So there are two things that is big. One is Hindi music, and two is Islamic culture and preaching and those sort of stuff. Within that conjecture, Bengali, I presented my talk in a Dhaka University program, and there was a very well-known Bengali cultural activist who denied the existence of hip hop and rock and roll music in Bangladesh, which means that there is that sort of tendency of downplaying the existence of this. So, but if you, the current government, one of the tool of the current government, which has been criticized for many reasons, is to organize regular concerts in various cities, so they understand the relevance and popularity of this music. And to come to the second point, they use, they were influenced by bands like Pink Floyd, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, you name it, but they use Bengali lyrics and language in their music, and now we see some sort of like fusion that brings in the traditional music within the rock music and being produced in various spectrums. I hope I could answer the questions.
Thank you, Mubashar. Maybe Chu and Umaid, to you, since you're both currently in exile and sort of recently in exile, we have a question about the relationship between the diaspora and the home country, especially in the age of the internet, and how dynamic that relationship could be. So could you talk a little bit about the role that diaspora communities and social media play in resistance movements? I don't know, Chu, do you want to start with that maybe?
Yeah, I'm thinking the meaning was, sorry, I didn't know what is the exception. Inception. So I'm thinking,
no worries. So the question is about the role that diaspora communities or overseas communities have to play in resistance movements in their home country, and the role of social media as well.
Okay. Of course, we're outside the country, but most of us, we still carrying the burden from inside the country, because when I arrive here, and some of the artists arrive here, and also the people they left and their family, they stay inside, whatever they do will have the impact. And also what is Myanmar is facing is not only about the political issue. It's like we have a double crisis, a triple crisis, because we still have a COVID with not a lot of not well equipped, and also the economic situation. Already we are a poor country, and after what happening, the economic situation is really like so the people who left the country, who leave the country or exit the country, when you're outside, like you cannot feel relief, because you still connected with the people inside, or maybe a friend, and maybe some of you, maybe you're far away from us, and even when you hear about our story and you feel sad and you feel like there is something in your heart, but we are really connected with the people that really left and what they are facing inside. So the outside, what we can do is we cannot be physically involved. So what we can do is the transferring the money and donating the money back, and also some operation and some project that the people inside the country, one they cannot work, one they cannot do, and when they do this kind of project, if it's not safe, we can help outside. And for the second question, is about the social media. Yeah, we had a coup d'etat before in 1988, and what is the difference that coup d'etat and now is the internet and then all the technological thing. We have to say it's also useful and also dangerous. It's like a fire. If you know how to use, it's useful, and if you don't know how to use it, and it can put you in danger. Social media is powerful. At the same time, some people inside Myanmar and also some people outside, they should be really careful about it, because for the one use and then one post then can give a lot of information to the other side, and this can give a lot of life and danger.
Thanks, Shu.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'll just, when you're from Afghanistan, it is very unlucky, you know, and when it comes to diaspora, we are very unlucky with our diaspora as well. Just taking back the last 20 years when the Afghan diaspora returned to work in Afghanistan, the intention was, and I'm saying this, it was not the intention of everybody, but just the majority of the diaspora who returned back home, was either to get a political position, a minister, a deputy minister, or become president. We have the cases of that. Or basically the idea was that, oh, I have a mortgage in North America, or in Canada or America or in Europe, so I'll go work in Afghanistan, get a fat salary, and come back and pay my mortgage and live a happy life. So that has been the intention. So that's why I'm saying we are very unlucky when it comes to diaspora. And when they're sitting in their comfortable houses in Europe or North America or Australia, and they preach about a civil war, and they preach that the other people who are back there at home in this harsh winter and they do not have anything, they ask them to go and stand up and fight. So I think it's not practical. It's not fair. So I think there are some do's and don'ts. As Afghan, as diaspora, either a Bangladeshi diaspora or Burma or Afghanistan, I think for you, it's very important that do not spread hate. Have some empathy, have some kindness. The people inside your country in Afghanistan, Burma, or Bangladesh, they're going through a lot. And it's very important that you have some kindness and understanding of what they're going through. Second, don't spread hate and misinformation. Right now, what I see from the Afghan diaspora is that they're preaching so much for this ethnic divide, for the civil war, for this, all of that. So I think it's very important that we be very careful about our messages, especially in the age of social media. Right now, we are extremely connected. Whatever event or anything is happening, it's all happening at a digital level. So if there are protests, if there are art, if there's conversations, if there's dialogue, everything is happening in a digital level, and we're well connected. Virginia, Kabul, Istanbul, Sydney, we are all happening at the same time. So we have to be very careful with our messaging about what we are preaching. So I hope that the diaspora right now takes this seriously. Support, like $100 will not mean a lot to a person in the United States, but it can be the expenses of 1 month for a family in Afghanistan. So support as many people as you can. Be kind, have empathy, don't spread misinformation, and don't preach for civil war, and make sure to come together, welcome the people who are getting out of Afghanistan right now, and find positive ways to help, alternative ways of thinking, solutions for the problems. Do not be the problem, be the solution for those problems.
Thanks, Umayyad. I think good words of wisdom right there. We have a really interesting question that I'm not sure which one of you to put to. So I think whoever wants to answer this or has something to add, definitely chime in. We've focused a lot in our discussion so far about the positive impact that art and culture can have in movements for social change. But this question is asking about examples from any of your countries where art and culture have been used by the state for propaganda, or to sort of put forward a sort of state accepted version of what it means to be a citizen in any of your countries. So if there are any examples of that, and then if you have any thoughts on how sort of independent, free-flowing art, like all of you are doing, can be used to challenge that sort of state-sanctioned or state-propagated art. So it's kind of a complex one. I don't know if anyone wants to tackle that first. Go for it, Umaid.
Rhonda, I think in countries like us, in Afghanistan and or Burma or South Asia, the state, the government specifically has a tendency to use any new movements in their own benefit. For example, if there's something goes viral, if it's an art movement or a music or a movie or an activist, they try to find ways to associate the state with this movement to sort of gain legitimacy and also connect with the people. So there has been such kind of tries from the government in Afghanistan as well. For example, when we started ArtLore, there was a lot of, most of the time that the state, the government wanted us to work on different campaigns with them. And now it depends on the movement and the organization and the artist, that how you differentiate, how you put aside, like how can you keep your independence, your artistic independence, and continue working? Because most of the time the state also is coming up with issues of public health, for example. It's an important issue, it's a national issue, so you have to come up with ways that you can be associated with the message of the state. But there are times that the state wants you to, for example, make a cult figure out of a president, or make a cult figure out of a minister of defense, or people like that. So that's the time that you have to be very careful that what are you really, it is a very fine line. So most of the times it's very difficult for artists and activists to keep that line of independence and also helping the state. The challenge is that in countries like Afghanistan, the resources are with the state, or Burma, for example, all the resources comes to the state. So if an art organization or an artist wants to thrive, they need resources. And for resources, most of the time, you have to go to the government. In some cases, for us at ArtLore, we were lucky to raise funds personally or from international organizations to keep our work. But if we had to only go to the government, we would never be able to have a movement or artworks which criticizes the government, because a lot of our work is against the status quo of the government, against the president and everybody else. So if it wasn't because of the resources we had from outside Afghanistan or from individuals and then businesses and donors, we would never be able to stand up against the government. So it's a very fine line. I don't know if I was able to explain it clearly.
For me, I think during our talk, I think I explained a little bit about the censorship in Myanmar, and also how the government, and also because at this time the government was military, so how they use the art to dominate the mind of the people. What is a little bit different is in Myanmar, the government doesn't support art at all, and it just barely see the kind of a government art gallery or a museum, and we have very few, and we can count like this, and very few of them are well organized, and a lot of them are just like a very small and not a lot of interesting or a valuable thing inside. So yeah, most of the Myanmar artists, since a quite a long time, they have to try themselves and build themselves in the artwork. And even for that, they were quite brave and strong for, since I didn't decide to be in the part of the Myanmar art world, and then the first art gallery is kind of is built from the groups of artists, and everything is privately they use it with the budget and with their own budgets, not with the help from the others. So I think the idea and the concept is really free, the one they want to create, but maybe the idea from the I think it's going to be long. The idea is not from the state, and also the idea of the demand from the outside people, you know, the people who's helping them, also from the idea of the demand. Maybe they will have a little bit of influence and impact, but most of the time, the hour they are free, and in Myanmar they're also carrying this artwork themselves. So even when we have a dark time, and they can try themselves, and we reach in this point. So imagine that in the future we will be under a better government, with the support of the government. I think the art world of Myanmar can develop a lot, because people already have the energy and they know how to run, just a little bit of push and they will be go first.
So I'll just add quickly an interesting story that I heard recently. But in summary, Bangladesh government has been quite generous in supporting arts, culture, drama, and stuff. But nowadays we see a kind of movement towards supporting one sort of narrative of history and political imagery, without going into detail, but how artists on the ground are kind of building resistance. And I want to share this story because I think it's a fascinating story. And I was talking with a friend who is a cultural activist, and who were visiting a town in Bangladesh where jute mills were closed down, and they were organizing a street drama. And before the night of the drama, detective police came and asked them to provide them with drama script. And so they did give them a drama script, which was totally written on that night. And the detectives, they said that they made several censors and comments on the script. But my friends never intended to perform that drama based on the script that is censored by the local administration. They just fooled them. And on the day, they presented the drama the way they intend to present, without using that script. So that, I thought that's a fascinating story about how to resist under increasing pressure, and I'm sure there are many other stories like that in Bangladesh, and I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thanks, Mubashir. I actually have a question for you. Someone is asking about whether or not there are women-led rock and roll bands in Bangladesh. So maybe that, plus what is the greater role of women, if any, in the musical movement that you've been looking at in Bangladesh?
Oh, no. I mean, one of the most popular band is called Chirkut. I mean, if it helps, I could type in the chat. You could check it out in YouTube. It's led by a female vocalist. And we went to the universities around the same time, and it's very big. Probably one of the top 3 bands now that is operational. And there were women were part of cultural movement since the inception of the state, and before that. In that front, it's quite encouraging. And there's another band called Bangla. It featured a female vocal as well, but they were not operational. But if you consider, if you ask me to tell you about the gender ratio, there is a disparity, but it's not only a Bangladeshi thing, it's a global thing. But I haven't found anyone promising in the hip hop scene. maybe because of the style of the music and so forth. But there are few in rock and roll bands. Thanks.
Thanks, Mubashir. Maybe we can just continue that theme, and maybe Chu next, if you want to talk a little bit about the role of women artists in the movement in Burma, and then Umaid will come over to you with the same.
The role of women artists in Myanmar, like in the world, we have a less number comparing to the male artists and the female artists, of course, less. But it's what is interesting is why we have less number. When you think about it, it's not only about the gender equal, and also what is interesting is like a culture, and also how the society think about the artist is also interesting, and to consider, to answer the questions. And now I have to say it's more and more women artists comparing to before, but still less number than a male artist. The hours are they reflect a lot of the situations in Myanmar, maybe because we're from the same country, from the same background. Sometimes maybe the hours the medians are different, but the voices, the way we think is quite like you still can find of course, different messages, different concept hour, but you still can find a little bit of a common thing. It's that something, to connect all of us together. And more and more well-educated young people, and some of them are graduated from outside. And when they came back to Myanmar, and what interesting thing is they already know the history and the culture, and then the tradition of Myanmar, and they bring a new concept, and they adapt it instead of they changing everything, and they adapted because what we are working in Myanmar, all the artists, both male and female, the culture and the tradition is really, we have our own identity. And you still can find every art pieces of them and identity. So when they twisted it, I think it's a really interesting artwork for the world to see another dimension of artwork from the Myanmar point of view. And I have to say, and a lot of young women artists, they are good in the technology, kind of a modern technology, a digital technology, and then they use this technology and they combine with the culture and traditions, and then the artwork is really amazing. One I wish I can show you, and then I'm sure you will love it.
The women artists of Afghanistan are on the forefront of the battle against Taliban right now, and they have been extremely well organized. They have been creating works of art through music, movies, animations, murals. We are blessed at ArtLars to have around 23 female artists who worked at our collective and are currently working with our organization. And they have been very creative. They're very resilient, although they don't have to be, but considering the situations in our country, so they have to be very resilient. And every single day right now, we see that the women of Afghanistan, especially the activists, the artists, they're standing up, they're doing protests, they are keeping their voices loud and clear about what's happening. So I think in the history of the recent history of Afghanistan, I think we are blessed to have many female artists who are strong, powerful, and they're role models, not only for Afghanistan, but for the region as well.
Thanks, Humayun. I think what's clear from our discussion today is that our next event needs to be some sort of in-person exhibition where we can actually see pieces of art, we can hear all of this great music that we're talking about, and just really sort of revel in everything that this artistic creation is putting out there in the world. Unfortunately, we're getting close to time, so I think we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today and for the really great questions that you've put to our panelists. And of course to Chu, Umaid, Mubashar, thank you so much for not only spending an hour and a half with us today talking about all of this great art that you're producing and seeing and researching, but just thank you for the work that you're doing and the work that you're spearheading, and just really putting all of this sort of positivity out in the world and in really relatable ways. Obviously at IRI, we're really interested and eager to sort of continue these collaborations, and no doubt others who have been listening today to the discussion will certainly be interested also in engaging what you're doing and really helping support the artists that you've talked about and these art movements across the world. So thank you again so much for your time, and we really look forward to continuing the discussion with all of you.